Hello, everyone. My name is Sky Lamb, and I am representing my startup Mad Lab from Harvard University. Next slide, please. Last year, we lost a close friend to a drug overdose. Her drugs were laced with xylazine, a dangerous additive very similar to fentanyl. But while fentanyl test strips have been effective, they fail to address the evolving landscape of new lacing agents left undetected by current products in the market. Our friend never could have known. Next slide, please. So here at MabLab, we're now on a mission to prevent all overdoses from laced drugs. Next slide. To put more context behind the ongoing overdose epidemic, more than 109,000 deaths occur because of laced drugs every single year. That's one overdose every 5 minutes. The problem is that 91% of these deaths could have been prevented with a solution like MATLAB. As mentioned before, the main focus in the media right now is on fentanyl as the leading lacing agent, but less emphasis is placed on additional lacing agents like methamphetamine, benzodiazepine, xylazine, and methadone that, when combined, actually account for more deaths than simply just fentanyl. And these four additional lacing agents are currently left undetected by products on the market. Next slide. So here at MabLab, we're tackling the overdose crisis using our 5-in-1 test strip design, giving users a result with 99.5% accuracy. We're using an established method of monoclonal antibodies, which is the same underlying tech behind COVID-19 tests and pregnancy tests, where you have that familiar control and test line. Or fast acting. All we require is 1 milligram of the drug to give you a result in less than 3 minutes. Next slide. So for more information about how it works, all you need to do is sprinkle a small sample of the drug into the provided buffer solution, very similar to COVID tests. Stick our test strip in, wait for 3 minutes, and if your test strip is positive, you can scan a QR code on the back of our test strip packaging to find more information about hospitals near you, but also what to do if your test is positive for any of the lacing agents. Next slide. Moving over to our competitive advantage, our patent covers novel multiplexing techniques on a singular lateral flow device. And we're able to do so by overcoming the problem of cross reactivity, which is where something tests positive for something it shouldn't. With our current IP, we could also expand to different applications, like testing for sexual assault prevention with rufinol and ketamine, but also testing for common allergens. And finally, we are the 100% owners of our IP and are not affiliated with any university tech transfer office. Next slide. As mentioned before, we are the only ones on the market who could test for more than two lacing agents on a singular device. And more about our unit economics, we plan to sell each test strip for $3 at a 50% profit margin. We also offer limited regulatory risk. As a Class 1 exempt medical device, we do not require any FDA regulation, and we have limited technical risk as we've been working with top university scientists at Harvard and Columbia. Next slide. And now over to the competitive landscape. Our biggest competitor right now is a company called BTNX. And what they produce are single lacing agent test strips, namely for just fentanyl. And just for reference, they sell about 40 million test strips every single year. But at the exact same price point, you can instead purchase MabLab's test strips, which are 5 times more comprehensive. Next up is Confer Biosciences, and what they are is a post-exposure test as opposed to us, which is a pre-exposure test. And the way to describe that difference is a post-exposure test is something you take after you overdose. So to use Confer Biosciences, after you overdose, you could pee in a cup to see what's in your system. But it's not helpful at all if you don't prevent the overdose in the first place, so prefer a more preventive solution like MabLab. And finally, forensics proficiency testing, what they offer is max spec services. So you could send in a sample of your drug to a remote lab, wait 1 to 2 weeks, but also pay upwards of $500 per test, which is not at all accessible to the recreational drug user. Next slide. For that reason, we're going B2B, partnering with universities, harm reduction organizations, as well as local and state governments who will buy our test strips in bulk and then hand them out to the communities they serve at no cost. Next slide. And the way we do this is through direct distribution. So right now we're sourcing as many letters of intent to join our waitlist for our test strips. And then after our launch, we plan to go to third-party distributors like McKesson, Cardinal Health, who can add our test strips to their website. And with a click of a button, anyone in the community can add our test strips in bulk to their cart. Next slide. After initial B2B traction, for anyone who doesn't fall into one of those three buckets, we also plan to expand to go D2C through our website or via Amazon for customers like universities, family members of drug users, law enforcement, as well as organizers of music festivals. So tons of new customer bases to open up here. Next slide. And for our sales and marketing plan, we are leveraging the existing solutions that currently center around fentanyl. So, for example, the image on the left is a digital campaign targeted towards parents. And what we could do on MabLab is simply expand the focus on fentanyl to instead the five deadliest lacing agents in drugs. And on the right is a photo I took on the New York City subway with advertisements for fentanyl test strips, which we could also market instead to our 501 test strips. Next slide. Looking towards our market size, our TAM is $128.7 billion. Dollars. That's consuming the 275.5 million drug users all across the world. But scaling down to our initial beachhead of $1.5 billion, dollars, that's only 20% of drug users in the USA who have used drugs in the last month and are likely to purchase a test strip once a week. Again, this space is historically underfunded and underutilized, so tons of innovation and tons of market share to bring up here. Next slide. We also took the product to the market for initial product market fit, where we interviewed over 300 recreational drug users. 79% expressed concern about more than just fentanyl, which really validated our value proposition of having multiple lacing agents, and 88% expressed interest in using our test strips if offered. We then brought the conversation over to the customers, the B2B stakeholder organizations, where 94% expressed interest in using our harm reduction tool on their campuses and their local communities. And on the right are some of our key partners. Right now, we have over 80,000 test strips using our LOIs for our waitlist, including partners like the Harm Reduction Action Center, as well as Brown University. Next slide. So why now? Number one is the recent legalization of drugs. Our thesis is that new opportunities will emerge surrounding drug education and drug safety, specifically through harm reduction tools like ours. Next is the recent injection of public funding, where back in 2022, $26 billion was allocated to local and state governments to purchase harm reduction tools like test strips. Bringing the conversation back closer to home, the state of Pennsylvania just last year purchased more than 400,000 test strips for the community. That could transfer over to $1.2 billion of revenue on our team. And finally, personal ties. Today, 40% of Americans know someone who's overdosed on laced drugs, so the time is now to put an end to the overdose crisis once and for all. Next slide. Using our 5 year projection with our 80,000 test strips and LOIs at $3 per test strip, we have initial 240K in year one revenue. Next slide, please. And our ask is simple. All we need is 2.5K that will allow us to continue with product development to produce 500 additional test strips for our product testing. Through the funding, you could invest in a sound business and save lives at the same time. Next slide. Finally, this is our team. I previously generated over $1 million in sales revenue at Harvard state agencies, and my co-founder is really experienced on the scientific side, conducting research at Harvard and Columbia on monoclonal antibody development. Our team includes postdocs. We're currently working at the Polyeco Harvard Life Lab HBS to develop our test strip, and our business team is helping us gain additional letters of intent. Finally, Carly is our marketing lead. She's pretty famous on TikTok and also a colleague of mine at Harvard, so helping us reach to new Gen Z audience.